Hello, this is Josh Gutman, and I'm here with directors Jesse Moss and Amanda McBain to talk about their documentary Boys State, along with a number of the film's subjects, such as Stephen Garza, Renee Otero, Ben Feinstein, and Robert McDougall. Boys State follows the journey of high school participants in the American Legion Boys State program in Texas, where they are tasked with running for a mock government. The film navigates their journey, creating party platforms and campaigning for the mock governorship of Texas. The film premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival, where it won the U.S. Documentary Competition Grand Jury Prize. The film is set to release through A24 and Apple TV+. Hello, this is Josh Gutman with The Nocturnal.
Hey,
Hi, Josh.
Hi, I hope you're both doing well and keeping safe and healthy with the virus going on.
Yeah, thank you.
So, what led you to making a documentary about Boys State?
The motivation to make the film was, I think, the question that we're all asking ourselves in America, which is how did we get to be so polarized, so divided as a country, and looking for a story to help us understand that. And in reading about Texas Boys State in 2017, voting to secede from the Union, kind of an outrageous and playful act, but one that I think it is kind of in its kernel like a very real expression of that division. We thought, let's take our camera to Texas and see if young men in Texas can actually talk to each other across that political divide. That's a pretty rare space in America, to be in a room together across political divisions. And so that was the impetus to make the film.
Was that story about the secession along with the location, was that why you picked the Texas branch specifically?
Yes. Short answer is yes. Texas is also interesting because it's not a completely red or a completely blue state. It's a purple state, and it's also Texas, so it's big and outrageous. And the program there is very big, 1,100 kids. So there's a lot of reasons we picked Texas, and then that year we wanted to see, okay, if they seceded last year, what are they going to do this year?
Can you go into how you were able to get in contact and start working and developing your relationship with Boys State?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, we sat on the idea for a couple of months. It's sometimes a little hard to act on a creative idea, as you probably know, but at some point, Amanda just reached out. We were certain that they would say no, because they've been embarrassed by the secession vote. But Amanda reached out to the organization, and they were immediately receptive to a conversation, because what we were interested in is what they're interested in, which is civil discourse, which is kind of understanding how you learn about democracy, and that democracy is not a spectator sport. And we wanted to follow 4 young men through the program. And I think they liked that idea that this would be very immersive, that we were going to kind of live inside the program and not just visit for an hour or a day. So when they heard that pitch, they said, okay, let's talk. And from there, we were on to the casting process.
So what influenced the decisions you made in terms of the particular kids you wanted to focus
on? Well, that was probably the most important piece of making this film, was finding the right people to follow through the program. We make character-driven documentaries and need to be inspired by the people we follow through whatever it is they're going through. So there's a certain set of things we're looking for. It's not a totally rational process, what you're looking for when you cast people. We had a very big group to choose from. So whittling down 1,000 to 4 is a process, and it's a needle in the haystack process, really, where we are on the phone for months talking to a bunch of really interesting and formidable kids. But what we needed was a diverse group, for sure, in both character, background, and political leaning. And so it took a while to find them, but once we did find them, the minute we met them, we knew you need to be in our movie. And so
I think you're looking to fall in love with a documentary subject. I mean, it's so much hard work, and that you really need to find a kind of deep connection to draw you in and to sustain you in that relationship. And they need to kind of reciprocate by trusting you, right? And so that's not a kind of rational process. You can have a checklist, but really it's sort of what you feel in your heart. And I think all four of these boys, we might not agree with everything they say or do or their politics necessarily, but we really did kind of come to identify with them very deeply, and why we were drawn to them is they just kind of they had some kind of intangible quality.
Considering how a lot of these kids do exhibit either political ambitions, were there any concerns that they maybe had regarding how they were depicted or how you would depict them? And if there were, how did you handle them?
I mean, I think there was a certain amount of confidence they all had going into this about who they were and what they believed politically. I mean, they were vulnerable enough to have their minds changed or to have their, I mean, they learned, all of them grew quite a lot in the experience of this 1 week, which is a testament to their sort of self-awareness and self-reflection. But I think that what was important to me and what's always important to me in making any film is that when we do show them a rough cut at the end, that they feel what we portrayed was accurate to what their experience was. And that was true for all of them. Now, they were 17 and now they're 20. So there's a lot of change that happens for anyone after a certain period of time goes by, but particularly that age group. They're now college students. And when they look back at some of the choices they made, I think that they're more reflective and probably wouldn't make the same choice today. But remember, they're going through a program that's happening very quickly, and they're just, instinctively responding. And I think, to look back with 2020 hindsight is a thing. And then they will have this document for a while to keep learning from in some cases.
I remember you mentioned before about the importance of building the trust with the various boys. Can you go into how you did that?
Um, yeah, I think it's always a process. I think you have to be really transparent about why you're there and how your filming process will work. It's it's relentless on some level being followed around by a camera. I think all of these particular guys are comfortable with being on camera, and not everybody is, and you can't force that. That is it comes naturally to you or not. Some people are self-conscious all the time. I think I think we're still, I mean, it's not a relationship that ends when you've finished filming either. Then there's the relationship during the writing of the which in this case took a year. And now there's the part of the relationship where it's the after the film is made. And, these guys are endlessly interesting to me. I mean, I can't wait to see where they go and as they grow up. You know, I mean, I kind of want to make another film about them, but we'll see.
I think that we've learned that it's really important to listen too. I think that the way we make movies is maybe quieter, and that the camera is patient and observational to a degree. And we don't like to work with we had a big crew to kind of support the operation, but the way you actually kind of work in the field is I call it a light footprint. It's really to be unobtrusive and to be patient. And I think that people respect that. And I think that's kind of the foundation of trust is being honest, as Amanda said, sort of being upfront about what brings you to the table, and really being respectful and patient in the process and listening attentively.
Well, while making the documentary, were there any surprises or any moments that particularly surprised you?
I think the biggest surprise for us was not whether Stephen Garza was politically talented. We knew that when we met him, that he had sophistication and ambition. It's that when he gave a speech to that room full of boys for his party's nomination for governor, he had an ability to connect with them that many adult politicians do not have. that you have to be born with, that ability to sort of connect empathically. Um, he's a remarkable speaker, and he captured their hearts and their imaginations. And to experience that moment in the room was exhilarating. And to then share his journey through Boys State was exhilarating. And I think wanting to deliver that experience emotionally to an audience is what we worked hard in the edit room to shape, because that was what we felt. You know, we felt the surprise and the tears and the laughter and all of that kind of bundled up, and that was um, that's the heart of the experience too.
When you were preparing to do this, 'cause I know a big theme in the movie is also preconceived bias. Was there a bias that maybe was like in the back of your mind going in, and maybe it did possibly change as you were filming by the end?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it's hard to be fully self-aware, but in our even going all the way back into the who we chose to cast, probably um, you are you are already directing the film on that level. I think, you know, I went in with an expectation of seeing Lord of the Flies on some level, and I think that that is a bias of some kind, maybe as a female, maybe as a I don't, but what I then saw in how people like Stephen or Renee or Ben or Robert really controlled the group after some period of time, that was, I think, what I learned and really checked my kind of bias about what to expect from a 17-year-old conservative, group of boys.
Yeah, I think that we did expect a certain amount of kind of grunting and crotch grabbing, but to actually see that they, at the end of the day, could find common ground on the issue of guns, the most polarizing issue in America, perhaps today, was a surprise. That Stephen could summon this rabble to their better angels was a surprise, and a very hopeful one. So that's the turn that the film took, that we weren't prepared for, and that we were so I think relieved to see, and made us hopeful.
And it wasn't just I mean, it wasn't just Stephen, it was really the legislature also. If the year before they'd voted to secede from the union, this year they voted for universal background checks. So in Texas. So you had like a real listening happening, which I really wasn't prepared for. And that was really great.
What would you like the primary takeaway of the film to be for honestly either side of the political spectrum?
I think regardless of your political belief, I think the message of the movie is that democracy is not a spectator sport, that we cannot sit on the sidelines. We can't afford to, that the our democracy, its health depends on our willingness to throw ourselves into the process, to fight to protect it and preserve it. And this is not a theoretical issue at this point, and we can look around and see what the stakes are. They're existential if we do not throw ourselves into the process and make it better. Whether your form of action is political protest in the streets, or running for office, or supporting a candidate and registering people to vote, there are many ways to kind of express that. And I think even in our boys, we see different forms of service. Renee is an activist. Robert's at West Point as a military cadet. Stephen has a bright political future in elected office. So I think that's the message of Boys State: is democracy is not a spectator sport.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, and I think that comes off perfectly well in the film itself. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to say I cannot wait for when more people will get to see the film.
Well, thank you, and
Thank you.
with your help, thanks for your attention to the movie. We appreciate it.
No problem. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
I said if you could please direct your questions, that would be great.
I can definitely do that. So for my first question, this would be more towards Stephen and Renee. Both of you were sort of shown as being more openly left-leaning individuals in a predominantly conservative group. What would you say were your biggest takeaways from Boys State, and what would you want a left-leaning audience to be the biggest takeaway from the experience?
I will say that the one thing that I really recognize the most is that just as my identity in my life has shaped my politics, the same way is true for the other person across the other side of the aisle. Therefore, it is up to me as a, just as a person to be a little bit more accepting of other people's views in politics, because it's their life and experiences and choices that oftentimes frame the way that they believe that the world should be. And so I think everyone should understand is that you're gonna have a hard time understanding somebody else's politics because it comes from a life that is equally as complex as your own. I think understanding that first is how we can start beginning to understand ways to interact better with each other.
Yeah, I walked away I walked into Boy State having this mindset of that everybody there truly believes that what they believe in is right and that it is best for the country. One of the most rewarding experiences that I got out of Boy State was sitting down with a statesman named Riley. Riley was a student from nearby Houston. He went to Santa Fe High School, and Santa Fe High School was shot up about a month before Boy State happened, and he was there. And so we sat down after dinner, and we had a conversation about gun reform. And Riley didn't necessarily share the views that I had on it, or the views that a bunch of March for Our Lives kids had it. And as a person and as a survivor of that experience, who's actually gone through it, who has heard the gunshots ring out, who has feared for his life, to be able to sit down with him and hear his positions on he doesn't think that this measure would work or that we should ban this or this, but talking to him and explaining my position to him, and him being, oh, well, I never thought of it that way before, when us coming to agreeing on things such as mental health checks. I think it's the purpose of Boy State is to find somebody who doesn't agree with you, talk to them, and walk away with a deeper understanding of each other's positions and a greater appreciation for the art of bipartisanship and civility, and not just screaming at each other, "Hey, you left leaning gun nut," or you left leaning crazy person who wants to take our guns, or you right wing conservative nut job who wants to have an AR even though all these kids are dying. Be able to sit down and have a dialogue and walk away better for it, I think, is the overall purpose of Boy State, and definitely an experience that I won't ever forget.
So, sort of building on that, on the idea of issues that you found most of the participants caring about, this question is for Renee and Ben. While you were forging your party's platforms, were there any positions that you founded were like the hardest to sell with your various parties, and how were you able to reach a compromise?
For me, abortion was the big one that comes to mind, because when we were, and keep in mind, it wasn't just me, it wasn't just Renee, we had whole committees dedicated to figuring it out. But, when our committee came forward with the platform, originally abortion wasn't on there because my platform committee could not agree on a stance. And what they ended up deciding was, we're just not even going to talk about it. It's not our deal. And when it came up and we presented it, for about 6 hours, it was okay. And then, day one ends, day two starts, and immediately there's this big power schism within the party on, all these state delegates coming at me for not talking about abortion. And I'm there I'm kind of blindsided. It's the first order of business of the day. And how I sidestepped it was, and how I think works really well in the situation, I don't know how well it translates, is I framed it as a political issue. I said, guys, if we take any stance on abortion, whether it's pro-life, pro-choice, or somewhere in between, we are instantly putting that issue into the discussion, and it's going to turn some people off no matter what we do. If we leave it out, yeah, it might not be as comprehensive, but it's more bipartisan, it's more unifying. And I think there's some issues that government might not have business regulating. There are some issues that if you put it in there, government doesn't need to have a stance on every single thing all the time, when no legislature gets to everything, when no governor is going to delegate on everything. And there's times when it's just best to just leave it alone, right? And part of the spirit of compromise is knowing when to just walk away from a fight. And that was a very valuable lesson to have. So, and what ended up happening, if anyone's curious, is everyone kind of agreed that if we put this in, it's going to just be another thing in an already packed schedule. It's going to turn people off. And we ended up just leaving it alone and walking away. And I think it ended up being the best choice.
I would say on my half, I didn't have as much political capital as Ben because my political beliefs didn't really line up with the rest of my party or my platform committee. So my platform committee had a lot of pushback against me, and so as you can see within one of our meetings, within the documentary, like they're arguing with me while we're trying to set up the platform. And like the thing is that I find most interesting is because we're set up in political parties randomly. Both political parties are going to have the same platform regardless. It was just really about how you were able to sell it and able to advertise it. I think for me the biggest issue for me to frame and advertise was, yeah, of course, gun control, because that was something that was super pertinent at the time. I also wanted to address a little bit more into identity politics, but that also became a place for pushback. But I really will say that I was, fervent about the things that I wanted to talk about. We did get those pushed through the committee, and in the end, it taught me the importance of compromise and negotiation because that's quite frankly what was necessary for me to even get anything on that platform agenda.
And for Stephen and Robert, I actually have a very similar question based on your governor races. When you were doing your campaigns, were there issues that you found resonating with people the most, and were they the issues that you wanted to actually address going into your campaigns?
So very similar to what Renee was just talking about, because we were both in Renee's party. Gun control came up again and again and again, and it initially was an issue for both me and Steven that we had to face down. We had to keep talking to people about it, had to keep explaining stances on it. And I remember similar thing for me happened with abortion is that I ended up taking a stance that I don't fully believe in. I tried to play to the room, went in there expecting a very red room and tried to play to that and said some things that don't necessarily line up with my personal beliefs. And that was a big struggle as well for me in that race. Steven?
Yeah, so like Renee, I have a lot of positions that, again, for a perspective is everything, and it seemed that room was very, very conservative, and you see some of the things that they were saying. And so I decided to focus on a message of unity. The whole secession thing kept coming up in different bubbles and people trying to advocate for it. And so I decided that was an issue that I was willing to take a stand on and have that be the pillar of my campaign, was being anti-secession, pro-Texas voice state, pro-USA, without having to go into any specifics of how I feel about gun reform, abortion, LGBT rights, healthcare and all those things. But then the thing comes out about my position on gun reform, and it changes the entire dynamic of my campaign. And I have to go from how Renee says in an interview that he's trying to be as inspecific as possible to get the most votes from people who they're like, oh, he's cool. I have to defend my position now openly and say, yeah, this is what I support, and here's why. And so with that, I felt, looking back at it now, that I wish I had done more of that. That I wish that in a way that I wasn't trying to hide my positions, but knowing that if I went out there and I gave a pro-life, pro-LGBT, pro-gun reform, or I'm sorry, pro-choice, pro-choice, pro-LGBT, pro-gun reform speech, that I would not make it anywhere at all. I would be booed off that stage. And so I chose to pick a unifying theme, and that theme was challenged by one of my positions, and I had to just shift gears and run on it, and run on that as part of my campaign platform with gun reform.
while both of you, Steve and Robert, while both of you were running for governor, did you walk in with any preconceived biases, and did they change throughout the race?
So, like I said in my previous response, my biggest preconception was about just how conservative the room would be when in reality, I think a lot of people were a lot closer to the middle and a lot more willing to compromise on a lot of things.
100%. And you see snippets of it, and throughout the film of those people that are like, we need to, just stomp these Clinton-loving, abortion-loving.
They're always hardliners.
Yeah, they're definitely. But I never saw a person on the left take hardline positions like that. It was really on the right that you see in the film, and then I saw in person. And you see there's some shots of my face making a face, wanting to say something, but knowing that I have to keep to the strategy I'm going. That if I want to win this office, that I need to stay on the path that I'm in. And so I was again under the notion that this was a very conservative room. But talking to a lot of people, they're very moderate. They're very, they're willing to hear each other out instead of just tuning the other side out. So that was definitely a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one.
So speaking of strategy, though, this is for Renee and Ben. When you were like creating, what were sort of the key components to your strategies for like getting your party together and actually settle on a platform?
For me, I really wanted to follow Robert's rules of order. You know what I'm saying? I really wanted a very tight, organized party, and I wanted a party in which everybody voted on everything. That was really kind of my platform and the focus I wanted to take the parties. Primarily because if you see throughout the documentary, I have a lot of challenge to my position, and so I have to spend a lot of time trying to rebuild my political capital, whilst at the same time trying to create a counter strategy against the opposing party. So I guess it really was just me trying to save face, make everything look organized, make everything look like it's not falling apart. Because if you can see throughout the documentary, it's that the Federalists had a conception that my party was in complete disarray, and me trying to look stable, I think, was necessary for building my political capital, and also a pretty decent strategy to try to win votes from the other side.
I'd say mine was similar, but kind of the counterpart. I kind of knew I was pretty stable going in. I had a kind of a pulse on everything, and I could feel the room was with me. And I knew to keep it. Like there's a saying in warfare: "Get there firstest with the mostest." And my whole kind of idea going in was just keep moving, go, right? Get stuff done as quickly as you can, and not like piss anyone off, but and one of the big things I kept hitting on over and over in speeches was, guys, we got this done. We need to get this done. Let's get it done. This is how we'll get it done, right? And doing as much of that as I could while delegating out the responsibility and getting a consensus on it, like within reason, and just keeping momentum going and just keeping the feeling going that like, if you stick by me, we'll get to the next step, we'll get to the next objective, and we'll keep going, right? And because maintaining that stability is key when your strategy is exploit the instability of the other side, right? So maintaining that stability came through just keeping a lot of positive momentum and just like full steam ahead all the time and beat him to the punch.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to say again, thank you all for your time, and I'm really looking forward to when everyone gets to see the documentary.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's much appreciated.